Thanks very much both for joining for this call. We're going to be discussing the premium account transaction and balance API. And I wanted to start out by mentioning a word that you used, Mason, when we were talking about this project recently, which was you used the word fun. And I just really love that you used that word. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit what about this project made it so fun to work on.
When you get sort of like two different groups of people and somehow they're sort of united by a common mission, and then they can actually just collaborate and just deliver. And despite all the challenges we had, and there were a lot of little technical gremlins in there, the ideas from this group of people, just to keep coming and overcoming those challenges, just kept coming. And it was just really nice to see the deliverables just come, each week there would be a new achievement. And I think when you're an engineer, it's just really satisfying to see, okay, you've got this mission, it's very clear. We had a common client in this case, and the client was very clear on what they wanted to achieve. And this group of engineers were able to actually just deliver that and constantly meet the milestones that we'd set for ourselves, despite all the challenges. And I think each week it was really satisfying to go home on a Friday night and almost be able to sort of raise my glass and celebrate the achievements we'd made as a group of people together. But I think that's the key thing, is that, yeah, we got this mission. It seemed to be very clear for all of us, and we were able to just, continually strive towards that. And yeah, for me, that was, it's hugely satisfying. And yeah, each week I was able to look back and say, the way we had solved things was cool. I liked it as well that we always had options. That's always a nice thing, right? So rather than being in a sort of crisis mode, thinking, well, okay, we've only got one thing and we've got to make it work, there's always ideas coming from this group of people. Mads's team were always putting forward solutions. And then we had Ronnie on our side as well, continually saying, actually, we could perhaps do this or this. And it's always nice to then have a set of options to then say, actually, well, what's the best way, and debate those together and actually select one. And then always know that, okay, if we pick one and it doesn't work, we've always got then an alternative way. So that was, for me, that was a great fun, right? To have everyone just working in an almost unified way with a very clear mission, and everybody wanting to get there and everybody united in a way. It reminds me a lot of rugby games, where you're constantly ticking the scoreboard over, and it doesn't matter whether you're part of the scrum or the backs, but yeah, the whole team is just working together.
Yeah, I really love that you start with this question, because I actually also noted down that I think it's been really fun, and I echo what you said, Mesa. What I also think is fun from a developer perspective is that, and for me, working with the APIs actually generates a very concrete output very quickly, compared to setting up a file flow, file infrastructure, SFTP servers, and all that, where in your team in FinanceKey, it didn't seem like it didn't take many hours after you had the certificate up and running, where you then actually start getting data. And I think that is really, really nice and fun for a developer, not to be stuck for weeks and weeks in something, but actually start delivering to someone who needs this quite quickly. And instead of focusing on stupid integrations, actually start considering what logic can we build on top of this. I was also a developer at one point, and I think that is the fun part. It's not doing the technical registration, exchanging certificates. It's actually getting that time, do some cool code to help solve some problems. And then I agree, the collaboration has also been fun. So
yeah, I'm actually looking forward to the next one that we do together. And really, we've got the payments coming up, and potentially some other API calls as well that we can implement. And yeah, really looking forward to working with Danske on those, given the way that this one has panned out. It'd be brilliant to do that again. And I'm not just talking about myself, right? I know it's the whole team behind me as well. I think everybody inside FinanceKey really enjoyed this project. And like Mads is saying, I think it's the idea of seeing that the efforts and the work that you're putting in actually leads to something. Yes. And we were in the fortunate position of listening to the client and hearing them, they were coming back. And although they would now and again, they would pick one account and say, oh yeah, look, this one's not quite right. But it's always amazing to look at them and say, well, look, over the hundreds of accounts that they have, they're looking at just one. So you're always in the mindset that 99% of the data is correct, or more than 99% is always correct.
Just taking a step back, I suppose, question for you, Mads. Could you talk about like what motivated Danske Bank to invest in premium APIs and what were the goals from the bank side?
I can put it very simple, and I love this strategy because at its core, it's really just customer requirements. It is being able to meet customers where they want to be met. So if it's through FinanceKey or in some internal IT systems they have, or in an ERP, then we want to give them that option. So at its core, it's a customer requirement that we've seen in the market popping up more and more. Then to have a bit of flavor on that, I also see some companies right now that they make so it's not just the use case itself, but they actually make a very open-minded strategy that is just biased towards newer technologies such as APIs. So today, new developers from university probably have been way more exposed to REST APIs than file solutions, and being able to support that is also part of why Danske Bank invests in this. It's a future-proof technology and strategy that will solve our customers' needs, and I think that just aligns with my day-to-day mindset as well. That and similar to this project, so we decided in Danske Bank to release the API fairly quickly. So often in the banking world, you can go on and perfecting the product for years and years, and then when you go to market, you might experience that, whoops, we actually missed half of the customer requirements. Where I've really pushed to release this API so we can get this kind of collaboration with FinanceKey and the customers we have to actually meet the customer requirements instead of releasing the API in 2028 and then experiencing we miss half of the data fields that we actually need or stuff like that. So to me, I really like this guiding star because it matches very well with my day-to-day mindset that ultimately we're just here to help customers.
May, so this kind of connects with what you talk about a lot, which is this idea of shifting left, right?
Yeah, so this idea of shift left is that you try to actually put in place more upfront. So you're trying to anticipate, well, what's going to be needed down the line. And I think, very much this is what Mads is referring to here. He's sort of saying, well, customers are no longer wanting to look necessarily in the bank portal because they might have like 10 or 15 banks. He's suddenly saying, well, actually, what we can do is we can help the customer by providing the data as an API and provide it as pure data. And that way they can then incorporate that data into any system they want, into an ERP, into a TMS, and then the data is where it needs to be in order for them to do their jobs. So that's very much in like the shift left principle, that you are, rather than creating a tool and then not actually thinking, well, what's that tool being used for, you're actually beginning to look, well, actually, what's the best way to provide the data so that you can actually put it into the right tool so the customer gets it where they need it and gets the data earlier and faster and quicker and meets all their needs. Yeah.
And so definitely that ties in with a kind of win-win approach, right? Like everyone should be a winner in this scenario.
Yeah, and customers should be able to pick what they prefer. So I'm not saying that files will die out in Danske Bank. They will definitely live on for a long, long time. But again, we just see more and more customers needing real time, wanting to work with newer technologies. So it's a shift, and it's definitely something that I support and that I think will be like winning more and more traction, because in our personal lives we want everything to be instant. Why shouldn't it be instant when we work? It's weird if you come out as a 30-year-old from university, you get everything instant on your phone, but then you meet into work and all of a sudden everything is delayed by one day. I would be a bit surprised by that.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, so maybe if we can do a bit more of a technical deep dive here, and you've both kind of touched on this, but Matt, maybe let's start with you for this one. What were some of the technical challenges that you faced in designing the API, and how did you go about solving them?
I'll start in one place. There's always, we build it to be secure, we build for robustness and so on, but instead I'll focus on what we also talk quite a bit with Mesa and FinanceKey about, which is general data quality and what it actually means to be a bank with an extremely complex infrastructure. Because I think it's no secret that Danske Bank has an extremely complex internal structure. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of applications. We've built an internal API that needs to get data from all of these sources and then present it in a simple way to our customers or our consumers of the API. Combine that with always having moving targets. So, for example, a lot of things are happening in Sweden right now with Swedish infrastructure, which of course we also need to adhere to, but we want to keep the contract and the customer-facing or consumer-facing data somewhat stable. So it was an extreme, not issue, but we really needed to think through how do we make sure that data stays in place and doesn't all of a sudden disappear because something was migrated to cloud and used to be on mainframe. And it's an ongoing thing. So every time that infrastructure changes, we need to be aware and we need to ensure that consumers don't lose data that they previously had. I think that's and it's also very transparent that it's a thing we all the time consider, and we all the time need to stay on our toes to not miss out on, because a lot of things are happening in an organization like Danske Bank.
And did the co-design process between Danske Bank and FinanceKey influence the outcome here?
Ultimately, I want to solve some actual needs, or I want to meet some actual needs. So co-designing and co-developing together with FinanceKey, who very much also knows what their customers need, is just, to me, the best way to get to the end goal the fastest. We try, and I think in my team especially, we work agile and have this fail-fast mentality. So instead of designing for 2 or 3 years and then think, okay, now we're ready to release it, let's just co-design and co-develop with other experts outside of the bank to get to that goal faster and probably also in better quality. So the examples are FinanceKey you are of course on the other side, and you see from a technical perspective, it would be nice to have the currency on the accounts in the account endpoint, because then we save one additional request. I don't think we would ever have thought of that just designing ourselves, and then we added this feature based on your request. It's a small thing, and now I think when we venture into more and more data quality, I'm sure we'll also find some areas where we'll co-develop and you see some requirements from your customers, and then we can take it in and get to a really good product, hopefully way faster.
Mesa, anything to add on that? What's been your experience?
Yeah, I think that's a key point about the sort of minor change requests and everything, because it does take a bit of time and effort to understand client needs. And I'm glad Matt said that, because actually so often we talk about what client wants and try to deliver on their wants, but I think actually the challenge is sometimes understanding, well, what do they really need and delivering on those needs. And by collaborating, you suddenly actually have a lot more knowledge. FinanceKey does strive to understand customer need in a big way, and then we were able to sort of put that forward and say, hey, have you actually thought about this and discuss this, just so that removing all the friction from when we go live. And then that leads on to what else Matt said, which is that he talked about failing fast. Yeah, of course we want to fail fast. We want to be able to dismiss ideas and quickly then work on to the next one. And that all comes back to what we said at the beginning, is to be successful and to have fun, you need to see progress, right? You want to see that you're making progress to delivering the value and meeting the client needs on that.
One sort of technical question about the existing standards. Standardization is something that comes up a lot in API design, right? So Could you maybe both talk a little bit about like which existing standards you applied, which you didn't, where you chose to adapt?
So there is no official standard similar to ISO for APIs. So Danske Bank chose to base our API on the Berlin Group standard. In general, we are very, very keen towards standards. Again, it's because of a customer-focused mindset. We unfortunately hear, and I'm curious to hear from you, Mesa, as well, but we hear that a lot of banks do it differently. And I'm really sad if that is the case. And I would have loved to have like an ISO standards for APIs that we all had to follow just to make it easy for customers to integrate. But we do what we think is next best. So using this Berlin Group standard. We also know that what most people are used to is the ISO format. So it's often that we go back and forth, and when we have customer meetings, we can present to them and say, okay, this field is almost like this field in the Berlin Group. But I think, I would like to hear from you, Mesa, if you also see that banks do it differently.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, that is the case. A lot of banks do seem to think, well, okay, we're going to create a new product, it's an API, and then they decide for some reason not to follow any of the existing standards, but to actually also then create a new standard for this API. And I never really understand it. For me, you're sending a message. If you're sending that message by email or a letter, you don't have to rewrite the contents of the letter, right? You can still send whatever you're sending in the letter as an email. So for me, the first thing you should immediately decide is, well, we're going to create an API. What standard are we going to build it on? And I think, Danske made exactly the right decision in that. For me, it doesn't really matter whether you pick ISO or Berlin, but just pick a standard and work with it. There's already a lot of people who have sat down and they think and discuss a lot of details about what that standard should be and of the message format. But then you can adapt it and say, well, okay, we're going to do an ISO, which is generally XML, but you can say, well, let's do the XML as JSON and send that. But at least you have all the data entry points that are needed. And then you focus on the technical challenges about then how do you actually use the protocol of the API standard to then actually transmit that message. But for me, it is hugely critical. And I know FinanceKey, we kind of thrive when banks don't use a standard because we're an aggregator and we tend to standardize everything. But if we really want to see APIs take off in the banking world, we need really for a standard to evolve so that we make it simpler for customers. Otherwise, we're never going to get to that critical mass. And even though FinanceKey thrives in this world of differences and variations, I think for FinanceKey to do even better, it would be if there are these standards, because then suddenly the API community will take off. We'll see an evolution of industry, and everybody would benefit overall. So we will happily move on to the next technical challenge if this difference in standards could be removed and eliminated. But at the moment, we spend a lot of time implementing each bank, and one of the big reasons is that we have to then sort of do this mapping process where we say, okay, that's the format of your message. This is how it should map to the Berlin Group or to the ISO standards. But Danske did it exactly right, in my opinion, that they decided, right, that's the standard we're going to follow. Okay, now how do we actually send that message through as an API?
I agree, and I hope that also customers actually push for having standards instead of. And I know it's difficult in this space, but FinanceKey is one thing. You have all the technical capabilities and already have integrations in place, but smaller companies with one developer having to do integrations to 3 different places, and none of it is the same. I think that's actually a problem. And as you say, Mesa, the APIs would probably accelerate a lot faster if that one developer in 2 days could make all the integrations instead of spending 2 months.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a bit challenging for customers, right? Because it's getting quite technical, and they don't realize, okay, that there's probably these different standards. They just see at the moment we just say an API. Maybe we should start to sort of say API based on Berlin or API based on ISO, and then people will begin to realize that there are actually these different variations and variants that are causing this complexity, not just for customers, but also for your own internal technical teams and things like that. And then maybe we would start to push for a common standard across the thing. And the thing is, it's already difficult enough, right? I think I mentioned this in one article. It's not just about the format of the message, but then there's also the standards in about the authorization, and then there's security. So it's already challenging enough. Why make it even more complicated by introducing yet another flavor? Let's just avoid that as much as possible and quickly align as an industry, well, what standards do we want to follow in terms of the message format, and then on do we want to use OAuth, and what certificates do we want, and maybe even get a central authority like to be able to issue certificates that would work for everybody. But standardization is key, I think, if we really want to see APIs delivering the true benefits that they can for the whole industry.
Yeah, I agree, and I also agree to the part where you advocate for reducing the entry barrier of the integration. I once from outside the bank had to do an integration to a bank, and it was extremely intimidating at first because it's things you maybe didn't see before, and it doesn't follow something that you would expect, and they have their own security set up. So again, just back to, we need to make it easy. We need to make it so that I'm just about to say everyone, but we actually see more and more treasury-like people who might also read our API documentation, and in my perfect world, they also would not be scared away by the documentation because they see the same in every bank or whatnot.
Yeah, that's where we want to get to, right? That's the ideal scenario.
Looking specifically at one of the features, one of the design features of this particular API, it uses incremental updates instead of like complete resets. I would love for you both to kind of talk that through, how that works, why that was chosen.
We actually allow for both. So you could decide on having like full resets for the entire day, or you can decide to have incrementals. But what we see is everyone uses incremental. So again, it's something that we did our pre-work on this and heard from customers. And this was actually before we went live, that they would like something to mimic what they have in files, so they only get the newest transactions since the last request. So it's just another customer-centric design feature that focuses on minimizing the work on the customer side or on FinanceKey side, so you don't have to have duplicate transaction logic, and you don't need to keep track of what did you already receive and so on. And then I think it also has an operational cost advantage. We could also talk some sustainability, that it's, instead of receiving the same transactions again and again and again, you could just get the 5 newest. I would love to have that if I were the consumer. So that's the idea behind.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we love it because it's immutable, right? So you receive this transaction, that's it. It's sort of almost written into stone, and you don't have to look far to see how many benefits this brings us. I mean, the whole essence of blockchain is built on the fact it's immutable. Each chain is a new link in a way. So, and that the whole chain is there. So this is the same way. Each time you add the new transaction, okay, this happened. And the big benefit this is bringing to our customers is that we can then actually say with pretty much certainty this has taken place. We can now either move the money out of your account, or we can do the clearing process into your ERP and say, well, okay, you've received this cash. We can see that it's from this particular customer. It's for these invoices. We can then send the postings through to their ERP system and do the clearing. So instead of starting the closing process on a Saturday morning, just as everybody loves, I know everyone loves coming into work on a Saturday morning, but if you don't love coming in, we now have that ability that you could potentially start the closing process on a Friday. The cash you've received has really happened. You can then actually clear the invoices and recognize the cash. And ultimately, if you're in charge of working capital, it means you're potentially shaving off 24 hours of your working capital, which for large enterprises can be to the tune of millions, right? So this is hugely beneficial to be able to rely on this data and be able to then actually execute processes earlier for corporates. But yeah, our customers love that feature, that that you're not got a transaction that's pending and then suddenly it flips its status through to booked at the end of the day. It means that they can say, okay, this money really has arrived in our account. This is the new balance. I can see that cash. I can actually do something with that cash. So yeah, we love this feature. Yeah. So, and I'd have to say this is quite unique, but I'm hoping that we can tell other banks and point them at this Danske implementation and get them to do it as well.
And also, yeah, it's always nice to hear again. FinanceKey is also really, really close to the customer, so it's always really nice to hear exactly what you observe, and it just confirms me in this design decision. So yeah, really cool to hear.
We can definitely see that there's like a lot of customer benefit from the way that this has been designed. But then even like stepping back and going back further, like I know this is something that you're passionate about, May. So could you talk about like what are the benefits of an API approach for IT treasury teams compared to working with a legacy approach?
A big part of it all comes down to the fact that with APIs, you can do things in singletons. I talk a bit, in the file-based world, it's a bit like doing batches. And the best way I always see it is like, if you think of a canteen or a restaurant, if you go to a canteen and they're probably saying, okay, we've got 300 people coming through today. That means we estimate you need 100 bowls of soup. So you all actually cook 100 bowls of soup for the day. If you add then too much salt or you over seasons it, you've essentially ruined 100 bowls of soup. Whereas in a restaurant, they will make a bowl of soup just for you, right? They will prepare that and cook that and do it. So if it gets ruined, they've only ruined one bowl of soup. So this is pretty much for me the difference between file-based and APIs. With APIs, you've really broken it down to the singleton. So that means you can actually process these transactions. You can get them in very frequently, very fast. And you make sure each one is perfect throughout the day. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the next transaction comes through is stopped as well. Whereas generally in a file-based world, let's say you have 500 transactions or 100 transactions again, one transaction that's incorrect or in some way could potentially stop the whole file from being processed. With APIs, they're designed so that you just continue like this all the time. So that's, for me, in the IT world, that means you're only then having to deal with the very exceptions. You immediately, know that 99% of the stuff is just working, rather than having to then worry about the fact, oh, you've got to get this one thing done to make sure the whole batch goes through. And then from an IT point of view, I mean, when I was working at Nokia, I was kind of like forced, or I was expected to deliver value all the time. And the nice thing about APIs, first, you've got this whole other team working on this and improving this service. And so you have to leverage that knowledge. So immediately it's like having 2 or 3 new developers in your team. But also because it's peer-to-peer, you tend to see the problems earlier and faster, because what we're doing is every couple of minutes we're sort of saying to Danske, okay, can you give us the next batch of transactions if there are any? And they're going, yes, here they are. But if for any reason they suddenly stop saying, yes, here they are, we know that there's a problem at Danske. And as a result, I can then send an alert, well, in this case, to FinanceKey, so we can say, oh, we're not getting the data from Danske Bank, or they've stopped saying hello to our messages. Whereas in the old world, you'd just be sitting there, you'd be waiting for a file to come in, normally the day after. And if you're in the IT world, you don't know, oh, has it not arrived because it's coming through Swift? Is there a problem with Swift, or was the bank just late? And then suddenly you're on this mission to hunt down where the problem is. Whereas in the API world, you know immediately, okay, where the problem is. Okay, you can then make a decision. Do we wait 5 minutes or do I reach out to Mads to see what's going on? And vice versa, if he suddenly sees as well that we're no longer requesting, and it has actually happened, I think a couple of times they said, oh, we've noticed that your calls have slowed down and things like that. So they ought to actually reach out to us. You kind of, with the API world, you immediately know where you are because it's peer-to-peer, it's continuous. You know, as an IT, you can definitely improve the quality. And I always try to look at things through this lens, this triangular lens, and I say, okay, when we're doing stuff, are we in the middle of improving cost and quality, efficiency and effectiveness? And if you're in the middle of that triangle, I think then this is often one of the ideal projects. And for me, APIs nearly always land in the middle of that one, because you're always going to end up improving cost, quality, effectiveness, and quality, control.
One more, I'm about to say small detail, but it's actually something we hear quite a lot, is the control part that you said at the end. So with the APIs, it's now in the control of either a finance key or the customer to decide how often do I want to get my data. If I want to change that frequency, I just do it. I don't need to call Danske Bank. I guess like in FinanceKey, you could even make it possible for customers to change this kind of frequency if they wanted to. And for me,
we do have that.
Nice. So having that kind of control on the customer side is actually something we hear as a major pro. And it again, I think that also lands in the middle, because it improves your cost, because your IT department don't have to call Danske Bank. It improves your efficiency. Yeah, so 100% agree.
So there's a lot of practical everyday wins that we're talking about here.
Yeah. On that, we actually have that in FinanceKey. In fact, in the early days, I was talking to someone and he just said, oh, you know what, it's just really easy if there's some green, red, or red, amber, green lights, rag lights on the, and he said, yeah, it could be really good if you could have two, one on your side, one on Danske side, and if there's any problems, we just want to see the status with two green dots, he said, if there's two green dots, I know everything's great. And then of course, you also have this scheduling option as well, so you can then change the frequency. And then we allow initially we set up one schedule, of course, and then we quickly realized, okay, they want multiple schedules. They want to be able to say, okay, we want to schedule at the weekend a slightly slower rate, because there's no point querying the bank over and over again now and during the weekends, and outside of office hours can also go down, but during office hours we want quite a frequent polling rate. So we had that, and went through that experience of talking to the customers.
So that is configurable for the customers on your end?
Yes,
That's
it is.
amazing. That's
awesome.
It
is. Yeah. So they can actually see all the connections for all the banks in a single screen. Yeah. So they get this sort of what we call the operational status lights, and it's hour by hour. So if there's any errors, they can see, okay, that it happened. And we have that for both sides. So if there's any problems on FinanceKey side, they can see it, or if there's anything on the Danske side, we have it. And then, underneath, if you drill in, they can then set the frequency and the scheduling rates and the polling rates and things.
I think this is really, really cool. And it just shows, because it is a small thing, but in my head, just the difference between having to go into your dashboard and just do this whenever I want to change it, compared to having to build up the courage to call the bank and ask to get the file frequency change, is just huge. And it will save time and money down the line. So I think, it's really cool that you already have this feature.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more we can do with Danske. Because the other thing I'd see or hear all the time, I'd just like to be able to open new bank accounts with a click of a button. And I kind of think, wouldn't it be cool if we could now send an API message through saying we need a new account in this country. So we'd collect all the information and they would send it through. So then they wouldn't even have to ring their account manager. They could actually just demand a new account. Especially certain industries, they're constantly opening up new accounts, and they say that it's quite laborious. There's quite an administrative process, but if we could get rid of some of that administration, we can accelerate the business.
Exactly. And it's also part of Danske Bank's strategy to put everything that we have as a service on an API down the line. So my ideal world would be that in your dashboard in FinanceKey, you have integrations to 20 different APIs from Danske Bank, and it's sort of like a cockpit. So the customers can just sit and do everything from there, and they just click one button, now the account is created. Click another button, the user is deleted from district. Or I think that would be really, really cool and save so much time, so much complexity. Also, just getting those real-time updates on transactions, or clicking the button to get the balance right now so we can make a decision instead of having to wait for tomorrow. So the really, really innovative and the really, really powerful systems come when we start combining the APIs in this way, and when we get more and more services, so that the ecosystem as a whole becomes instant to the extent that we want it to. Maybe I'll call it on time instead, because sometimes it's not always necessary with instant, but on time, and you just react to deviations. It's not the standard repetitive tasks. You don't have to do anything about those because it just runs through automation. That's my ideal world, where I imagine this cockpit, as you say, Mesa, where now the button is yellow. I need to be aware. Maybe I need to get some updates before making this decision or whatever. It's one day, and Danske Bank is working towards having these services, and I know FinanceKey seems ready to integrate to most of the things we want to expose.
Definitely. I mean, we would love to collaborate with you on anything new you come up with. So make sure you get in touch if there's any new API coming. That way, we would love to be able to prototype it.
I had some questions which were more about, I guess, practical guidance for adopting APIs for the end user. So if you're an IT engineer connecting to a bank API for the first time, what's the best way to get started? And maybe if you could talk a little bit about like experimenting with simple tools like Excel, using postman collections, example integrations. What would be some of the like best practice tips that you would have?
Do you want to start on this one, Mesa? Because you've been through it many times.
I mean, for me, the best way is always to have a partner like Danske Bank who can guide you through it, right? But I mean, I think that the nice thing about implementing APIs at the moment with the banking world is that it's kind of separate to the existing infrastructure, right? You're not having to change your production environment. You can actually start to build and consume APIs alongside your existing infrastructure. So it's kind of non-invasive in a way. So that way you can have a lot of confidence. And I'd probably start, by doing exactly what you suggested, using Excel or Power BI or something, and try doing something with the OData APIs and trying to actually making sure you deliver something of value. Because you should kind of have a mission, right, of what you want to achieve. So it might be just to sort of see, well, okay, where's my cache? And then you'd actually get your connection set up. Just do reading the data and actually then presenting that data somehow. So for me, that's the best way to start going on with that. Of course, I mean, we have FinanceKey, right, which is the perfect solution, and with all those documents and everything. So could potentially recommend that. But if you're an IT company, first thing you need to do is talk to one of your core banks that offers the APIs, and then find out how you can implement maybe just the account reporting APIs, and then start to experiment, perhaps initiating payments and doing some more of the sophisticated stuff that would help. But that's how I'd go about it.
Agree. In Danske Bank, we have the developer portal, so I would definitely start there. Soon we'll also have the ability to integrate to a mocked sandbox environment without a certificate, and that way, because we see a lot of customers who want to start small, start with just presenting some data as a business case internally. It is still new in the banking world, and some still needs convincing that APIs is a good way to go. And then I think on the more soft side, what FinanceKey also does with this customer needs is, it's not because I want to lecture people, but really make sure that you bridge IT and the business. It's so sit down as an IT engineer, talk to your treasury department or whoever you are doing this integration for. Maybe go through the APIs that we have, for example, on Danske Bank's developer portal, and see, okay, there is a payment initiation, there's an FX, there's the transaction and balance. Consider, before you even write the first line of code, what could we do? What do we want to do, and what do we need? It's similar to how it sounds like you work closely together and find those needs before you actually start writing code in FinanceKey.
So a lot of it comes down to developer confidence, I guess, doesn't it? So, how beyond documentation, like what else makes the API onboarding smoother, would you say? in that regard?
Yeah, it comes a bit back to what I said, that when I had to do my first bank integration, it was a bit intimidating. Again, FinanceKey has done it, I don't know how many times, but many times. If you are a sole developer in an IT department, then I think, but the Danske Bank APIs, there are standards, and we use standards for everything. So it's OAuth, it's this Berlin group that you can look up. So it may seem a bit scary at first, but hopefully when developers dig into the documentation, they will recognize a lot of the technologies, a lot of the way we do things.
These days as well, I mean, you could do quite a bit of vibe coding as well with a AI engine. I mean, at the beginning, I was quite dismissive of these AI engines, but these days the code is pretty good. So if you can find some examples on the web, and I always find it a lot better if you're using an AI engine to be able to write some code. It's better if you can give it an example and say, look, this is what this does. Please alter it or change it so it does something else. And I'm amazed these days at actually how good the code is that comes out. And yeah, I don't dismiss vibe coding anymore. Whereas before I've had suffered some bad experiences in the early days. I have to admit I'm using it more and more, the AI engines, just to check my code and verify my code and improve it. And I think that's a good place to start. You can take the examples that are out there and then say, look, I want to do this, and it will actually generate the code you need, and off you can go from there.
Then we have example Postman collections that we in Danske Bank can provide. So also just getting that first ping would probably build a lot of confidence. So it comes back to those standards that we started to talk with. I think when if it's the same everywhere, then it becomes less scary, and the entry barrier is lower.
Yeah. I think that's a good term to use, entry barriers. I mean, that's what it's all about. We really want to get those entry barriers as low as possible. So then you're actually increasing the value for everyone, right? Because at the moment, if the entry barrier is quite high, that means you're increasing the cost. So yeah, we really want to get those entry barriers as low as possible. So then that means that there's very little cost in implementing the APIs, and it's just everything you do is just pure value.
Yeah, I think that brings us quite nicely actually to a concluding thought, which would be, in your view, looking ahead, what would be the ideal API ecosystem for corporate treasury? We've touched on this a little bit, but if you could just like wave a magic wand, what would you both do?
That's a tough question.
Yeah, it is a tough question, but it does. My ideal world is actually this. When we talk ecosystem, and I think that's important again for the APIs, because if some things are still in batches and takes one day to get updated, but some other thing over here is dependent on that, then you sort of lose some of the synergy. So the ecosystem is definitely important to consider. I think APIs, that is the first step. I think a lot of processes actually requires event-based communication also, or in combination of. So not only requesting like on-time transactions, but actually getting that delivered when you have to react to something into your, again, if it's a dashboard or where you want to work in. And then self-service, I think, is important. So self-service on everything. It should be easy for anyone to go into, in this example for Danske Bank, into District and just click, I want to get this and this API. And then if it's through FinanceKey or you do it yourself, start working on that. I think that will also free up the innovation at customers if the blogger is no longer, again, back to entry barrier, but the blogger is no longer just technical stuff, but that is removed, and we start just talking about, I want to get a notification when I see this kind of transaction, and then when the threshold exceeds this amount of Danish kroner, then I want to do this FX trade, and after that I want to send an email to this person because he needs to be notified. Like that kind of scenarios can be really expanded to the extreme and remove a lot of overhead. So my ideal ecosystem, let's circle back to Danske Bank's strategy. It is what the customers need, and Danske Bank just needs to provide a service for everything that the customer needs. So customers can mix and match how they want to.
Yeah, I definitely concur with a lot of that. And I think if we come back to what we talked about the standards earlier, if we could actually come up with a unified standard across the whole industry as well, so that it can be easy to use, it means then we can start to focus on some of the challenges ahead of us. And I'm adamant that the future of generative AI in the treasury world will be that it will be built on top of APIs. I think we'll expose all the API calls through MCP or something like that, so that you can then actually just talk to your company generative AI solution. So you'll be able to type into Copilot, okay, how much cash do I have today? We're opening a new legal entity. Please create 4 new accounts. I think that's the kind of thing where we're heading towards. I know I'm probably looking quite far into the future, but if we could sort out these standards, that's the potential where we could be. And I would love, to be able to work on that, inside the remaining 10 years of my career. I'd love to be able to work on that kind of solution and, put an MCP controller on top of every single API call out there. But as long as we keep creating all these different variants, it's going to be quite challenging to get there. So we need that standardization across the entire industry so that we can then actually focus on the next problem, which would just be amazing, that everybody will be able to then just consume APIs invisibly through generative AI or LLM.
I think we've covered a lot of ground, and it's been super interesting. Any final thoughts?
I guess I just want to say thanks to Mads again, because it is tough in the startup world. I mean, when I was at Nokia, it's quite easy to talk to the banks because they immediately saw the value in talking to their customers. So, just trusting us in a way and recognizing that we did actually have that common goal. I just want to say thanks for that. That was really appreciated, that you brought us on and were willing to work with us and saw that actually we were looking for a win-win-win. It is one of our company values. We do want the bank to win, and our customers and ourselves. In fact, we have win times 5 because we also then extend it to the employees and everybody. So we are looking for those kind of outcomes thanks to Danske and the engineers. It really has been fun. Sometimes the banks turn a cold shoulder on the fintech world, but we felt really welcomed, really warm with Danske, and like I said, we had that very common mission, and I think everybody here had a great time on it, and it's been a lot of fun, and I'm just really looking forward to the next one. So as soon as you have that API, let us know. We will test it and implement it for sure.
And I fully echo that. It's been a lot of fun, and I think there's a lot of trust and a lot of confidence also in your abilities. I'm just amazed by how quickly you move, and definitely let's get the coming APIs up and running as well.